But thank you again for letting me interview you for North Avenue Review. I was really excited when you said yes, and I'm sorry it took so long to like get to this point. I had a really busy summer,
Great.
kind of all over the place. So I guess just like, how are you? How are things at Atlantic Contemporary overall? Like, I know I stopped working there like in March or so. So I guess how have things shifted, especially with the internship program?
Yeah, things have definitely shifted a lot, even to like set like just multiple times since March. So we closed officially on like March 13th. We had that like opening night on Thursday, and I remember like freaking out because all the headlines were starting to roll in, and I was like, "There's like 80 people in the building!" Like I was like pre-mask,
Yeah.
stuff. So yeah, we closed on that weekend and pretty much stayed closed through June, and then officially reopened on July 7th. So between March and reopening, we pretty much just like really quickly navigated like this new schedule. So we extended the exhibition that we had opened in January, the Charles Williams exhibition, and shuffled some other shows around. So we had a March or not a March, a May spring exhibition slated with Basira Khan that we had announced early in the year, and so we actually postponed that until 2021.
Okay.
I want to say that I think we're going to do that now in the fall. I don't even think we're doing it like basically spring again. So we shifted some things around there. We were going to have a studio artist program retrospective show in the fall anyway. Basically, what we did was instead of starting it um, like later in the fall, we pushed it forward. So it opened just this past weekend, so the end of August, and that's going to run through until the end of January 2021.
Mhm.
So kind of shifting those things around really made it easy to like just reallocate some funds in the budget that we would have spent on like shipping and handling. And one of the big issues too is like, for the Basira Khan show, she's in New York. She couldn't leave, but we wouldn't have been able to really get a truck in to pick up the work because of all the New York um,
Yeah,
shutdown
restrictions.
stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just kind of had to do a lot of things. So that was kind of like how scheduling shifted. We took everything virtual. I think
Mhm.
we did a year-to-date total of like events that we had hosted in a virtual format. I think we hosted like 78 activities since
That's
March.
awesome.
And I'm like,
That's so exciting though. Like
yeah,
just from a programming standpoint,
I
like
know. We were like, what in the world? Everyone was just kind of like freaking out and like didn't know what to do. And like all my peers and stuff have been like, we're not doing much. And then I was like, dang, we just like somehow I think the virtual just was like already in our repertoire. And so we just kind of like, and then Ethan, particularly, who, for context, events manager, um,
mhm.
has now shifted entirely to doing video editing. And so he's been our editing, YouTube editing guru. So
Oh
we
my
all
gosh,
just,
that's awesome.
yeah, so we've all just kind of taken on new roles. And been, we keep saying that like the big thing has been being really flexible and like really nimble. I think it's something that we've done over the years that a lot of people have a hard time with is just always adapting. Like we, have been able to be in existence as long as we have because of us being open to change, willing to kind of figure things
Yeah.
out to mold to the world we're in as opposed to being stuck in our ways and saying we can't do it because we're never going to change. So
Mhm.
um, I could talk probably a lot longer about this, but I think those are kind of like the key things was like shifting. You did mention the internship program. I'll speak on that briefly. I knew that because school shutdowns were so, I think, hard on students in academia, and like especially to having it jump into summer, like a lot of students I felt like were graduating and like entering the workforce, and I just like imagined for myself how absolutely terrified I would have been, even more so than I already was after graduating college, to be like, I'm never ever getting a job because the world's falling apart. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So like the least I can do is like continue the internship because that was a big question is like, do we or do we not pause on the internship? And
Mhm.
so offering obviously the current interns a chance to stay on was a big important deal for me because they shifted into virtual. You were a part of this group, so you shifted into virtual like midway through, which I felt like took time out of what you had initially intended to do. And I was kind of like MIA. I had no idea how to like
Yeah, you and everyone else.
yeah.
Strange.
So I was like, okay, let's move forward with summer. Let's do a virtual internship. Let's, just plan to have it be an entirely virtual experience. And so I quickly shifted and was like, okay, this is the new language, this is the new protocol. And we started off the summer group with weekly one-on-one. So there were, each intern had a 30-minute Zoom call with me at the same time every week where we would check in and we talk about stuff. And then we had a weekly intern huddle Zoom call that was about an hour long. And instead of it just being like a normal check-in like we do, where it's like, this is what I'm working on, it became educational. So I started putting together lectures kind of like on the topics of professionalism, like resume building, how to build a LinkedIn. And in this, particularly in the summer session, I used a previous grant writing PowerPoint that I had done for an actual Atlanta Contemporary public-facing workshop, and I kind of made it tweaked it to make it fit for the interns, and actually taught them about grant writing. So, and then we opened on July 7th, and so then we shifted, and so it was like weekly one-on-ones and weekly huddle, but then there was also one day per week where they would go on site. And so that's kind of how we shifted. And then now moving forward fall, we're going to be entirely in person again. Hopefully probably still with some virtual. We'll probably still do the intern huddle virtual, and we'll probably maybe do check-ins virtual depending on what that looks like. I don't know. I'll have to see.
Just like how that works and everything.
So that's pretty much how that's transitioned. And I think people are really appreciative to have something to look forward to and something to do.
100%. Yeah.
Especially over the summer when a lot of people weren't in classes. They're probably like, oh my God, this just kept me busy.
No, people just need something to attach their brain power to, just to kind of keep you thinking and not spiraling into like, oh my gosh, what is the world coming to? What am I going to do? What's everyone going to do? Because those are the kind of thoughts I know I was having in March as well, of like, oh my God, like, what's going to happen? Like, I felt like there was zero precedent for anything. And so it was just very, like, stressful for me. I hated the phrase unprecedented times. Like, I never want to hear it again. I hate it. I want some precedented times back.
Or the word pivot. Like, I've been trying to use the word navigate. I've switched over to like navigating these uncharted waters.
Like you're a sailor. I love it. You got to keep it fresh. Exactly.
Because I've been writing a lot of grants too for like COVID relief, and so it's like you have to talk about like how you've been navigating these uncharted waters. So I just have been thinking of all these ridiculous sayings and like analogies, but.
Oh my gosh.
They're driving me insane too. I need to think of some other way of putting it. New normal. I'm like, there's nothing normal about what we're going through.
There really isn't. I feel like in order to kind of cope with it, that's just like a very popular phrase we've come up with. But even afterwards, after like COVID dies down and everything, like things will still be different after that. Like I don't think as a culture we'll ever forget like the masks, like sanitation. I feel like that's still going to be things that are just ingrained.
My mom will continue to only ever order groceries delivered. Like she'll never go into a grocery store ever again.
Which is so crazy to think about. I guess with Atlanta Contemporary, and I just saw the exhibit this past weekend, but as well, a lot of the pieces were kind of in a response to social distancing and COVID stuff as well. How do you think it's going to shift, like, artists' work and such, like in the near future? Do you think it'll be a really big theme for the next 5 years or so, or maybe just like next 6 months to a year instead?
That's a good question. I think I mean, it's hard to like predict trends like that. I think that like certainly like pop culture is shifting and it's like becoming like a thing. Like a lot of designers are switching gears and they're like making masks instead of, I think that's what's tough is like capitalism as a whole is having to pivot in that way as well. And so I think a lot of arts and culture is heavily influenced by pop culture and things we see in the media and, at least trends in terms of what sticks or what gets media coverage or what people want to write about has a lot to do too with what's trending in those sectors, even though they're very separate from arts and culture. So I think
Yeah.
the fact that people are buying less, like I feel like people are buying more. There was an interesting article I read about how, like, if you look at the popular items sold through Amazon, like in the first couple weeks of COVID to like summer months of COVID, it went from like PPE, like sanitizer, toilet paper, like
Yeah.
all these ridiculous cleaning supplies, and then like once it shifted kind of in toward the summer, it became like okay, DIY home project,
Yeah.
materials, to then like over the summer, like outdoor, like sporting equipment, kayaks. Like Joey and I tried to get a kayak because we started going to the lake a lot because we like wanted to be in the water, but pools are closed. And so, but it took, he had like, it was on back order for like 4 weeks and then like finally we got it and they like, it's so crazy. So I think capitalism is shifting and I think people's spending habits are shifting. And so I think, with that, arts and culture will shift too as well. But I do feel like arts and culture is a separate sort of entity in that, like artists, at least contemporary artists,
Yeah.
artists that we're dealing with, do a lot of work centered around like, contemporary issues, politics, social
Yeah.
issues. So I think, I'm sure we'll see it, but I think what has become more prevalent, people are at home more, people are on the internet a lot more than they used to be, and people are eager for connection. And I think a lot of people are shifting their mindsets to be more compassionate and thoughtful of others. And with that, I think came that this sort of like interesting wave of civil rights for 2020, with the Black Lives Matter movement in June. And so I think rather than focusing on like COVID and what's happening with COVID, I think more people, because of their consciousness of the larger issues happening, like, it's making it more like hyperbolic. It's like, okay, the world is literally falling apart. We have
Yeah.
massive, natural disasters happening. There's hurricanes on the coast that are like actively ruining communities. There's like weird storms happening in Western, like, areas. There's, um, you know, just really intense racial tension. And so I think that's what a lot of artists are going to end up focusing more on.
Yeah.
And if anything, it'll just really be, a push toward works that can help people find solace and also hope and perhaps just understanding in all of this chaos. So that's what Veronica and I keep talking about in our language, is just that like art is essential. It's important for us to reopen. It's important for art spaces to be funded, because at the end of the day, when your world is falling apart, the only way that you can find solace is in creativity and expression of emotion, and that is through art and that is through community, because art spaces bring people together around
Yeah.
common issues. So I think that's what you'll see a shift in, is more work that like really just like brings people together and is something you can relate to, and it's just like soul enriching.
No, definitely. That 100% makes sense. I guess with like the studio artist program and everything, and just Atlanta based artists as a whole. I mean, Atlanta is such a hub in the South. I feel like we're kind of like, what is it in the South? I don't really know of any other like southern big cities that are going off like Atlanta does, especially when it comes to like media and like TV and television and such, at least like pre-COVID. I don't know about that post, but how do you see like the city kind of reacting to that as well, like in a similar way? Because I know, especially when it comes to like the Black Lives Matter movement, there are still protests and things happening every single day, but it just has like significantly less media traction now. I feel like in June and
Yeah.
July it was everywhere, and now it's like, oh, things are back to again like the new normal, but I don't feel like anyone's actually forgotten about those issues. It's just no longer a trending issue. So I don't know. How do
Yeah.
you see that? Like, do you think that'll be reflected in like the artists in Atlanta as well, or it'll be much more?
Absolutely. Yeah. From the back end of like, my role at Atlantic Contemporary, there's been a lot of conversations with peer institutions. Lots of like advocacy groups have formed. I just joined a like white art administrators like accountability group. So we like each made like goals of like things that we want to accomplish, and then we're supposed to hold everyone else accountable. And so in these groups, there's been conversations about what do we define ourselves as, our roles as white administrators, within predominantly white organizations, without just like quitting our jobs and like putting people of color in our shoes, just without really thinking like, how do we really look at the work that we're doing, the lens that we're making decisions through. And so I think that's where you'll see a shift is, not just, like we keep saying this idea of like, okay, it's not helpful to just like cut a check and give it to a Black artist or to a Latinx artist. It's not enough to just like give them money, because that just ends up being charity. So it's like we really need to think about how we are actually giving them jobs and opportunities, not in terms of like, okay, I'm going to quit my job so that way a Latinx development manager can start writing grants for Atlantic Contemporary. It's like, no, that's not what we mean. It's more just like, okay, when we go and we curate a show, let's really think about who we're, inviting to curate. What perspective do they offer or bring to the table? And how do the artists that they're selecting really think more holistically about a diverse range of voices? And through that lens and through that work, you'll see a shift in contemporary art and hopefully in the Atlanta landscape that just really starts to uplift more diverse voices. And I think when you put individuals like that in positions where they can make decisions like that, it sets a precedent, but it also sets an example of other peers and institutions that like, that's how you break the system. That's how you. So I think Atlanta is obviously a Black Mecca, and so we're kind of this like really great pocket, very, very conservative kind of, troublesome sort of state. I mean, we have been on a series of headlines on the national level of what not to do, basically, in a global pandemic. I think that there's a lot of conflict between the state and the city level, and I think the only way that like really, like, I always feel personally like, obviously, like, go vote in whatever situation you can vote in and like be an advocate across the board, but like the most impactful change you can make is like in your backyard and like in your home. Like if you yourself as a person can change your way of thinking, and you can change your way of thinking, you can speak up in your position at work. If you can go and you can vote people in your local city-based governments, and hopefully state-based, but more so city-based government, like that's how you make effective change. So I think Atlanta will continue to be it's the birthplace of civil rights because of MLK. So, it will always have that as a history. I think the city will shift, hopefully, and become more of, putting aside all of the state-based, bad reputation you have to deal with, like, hopefully this city will become or will continue to thrive as a place for diversity and a place where you can truly be a person of color and successful and like make impact. I don't know if I'm making any sense. I feel like I'm blabbering.
No,
now.
you are making sense. 100%.
how does that relate to contemporary art? Like it's not, like I said, at the beginning of this, it all goes back to, holding each other accountable as administrators and setting
Mhm.
an example to your peers to really, I mean, I was saying this before COVID and before the recent sort of like intense new social movement that like
Mhm.
no one no one can really tell a story better of a certain issue or experience than like the person who went through that experience. Like me telling a story of a black artist is never going to do it justice. If anything, it's going to do damage. So like putting the person who can like truly tell the story, in front of the mic to tell their own story is the best way of doing it. Provide a platform for them to do it and put them at the center of the stage. I mean, it's putting the community at the center of it all and really leading from behind this sort of upside down, that's not even a triangle, the upside down triangle pyramid. You
How
know,
you mean? Yeah.
we're down here and the community's up there.
The inverted point, like that's done there. Yeah, 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 yeah. I
That's
got
kind
you.
of how you do it. And then also just from the back end too, we've done a couple things like we developed a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy that's like more concrete. We've updated our values. We have a new diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory council with the board. And we're going to be doing DEI training every year, but particularly with both the staff and the board as well, and trying to
Okay.
put more leadership on our board. That is, so I think that will be how arts and culture shifts, is through the people who are in positions of power shifting,
Yeah.
and
That's
creating.
awesome to hear. I had
Yeah,
no idea that that was even like happening kind of within like the Atlanta artistic communities, which is really, really cool to hear.
yeah,
But it is something that's like more longer lasting than just an Instagram graphic or, a hashtag for a week or
exactly. Yeah,
so.
and I think that's what's hard with social media is people. I mean, we received a little bit of backlash when we put out our statement, and I think people wanted to see actionable items, but it's so hard to create action in a bureaucratic system where decisions have to be made, but also you want decisions to be made thoughtfully and, made in time where like people weren't giving certain institutions enough time to really
Yeah.
seek out the mentorship and the advice and have the difficult conversations first to then inform those decisions to then become action. So it's like you won't see the actual work being completed, for a while, but that doesn't mean it's being done in the background. Like there's so much that needs to be discussed before you just like go out there and like
Yeah. And like just jump right in as being like the be all end all expert.
that's why you don't see a lot of it and it doesn't seem maybe more transparency is what's needed. Like, this is our progress, but
Yeah.
you feel
No,
like it is being done and there's a lot of people that are really stepping up. I've been happy to see people really come together in that way. There was also like a really interesting, not to like go too off tangent, but the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta actually put out a COVID relief grant for Metropolitan Atlanta Arts Fund, the MAF grant, which is for arts organizations. And
okay.
the first round of grantees, none of them they were all white organizations. And so someone came out and like it was in June, like amidst all the stuff and basically called them out. And they took a step back, put out a statement. They hired a Latinx CEO, which was like already kind of in the works. And then they retooled the application, made it simpler. And they said that they were particularly looking at the second round of applications through the lens of DEI and really putting particularly black artists and black run arts organizations at the
Yeah.
front of their grant decisions, which was really great to see. I mean, they owned their mistake and then they went back to the drawing board and then they fixed it. And I thought that was really great to see in the funding community for the arts too. So
Yeah. No, that's such a good point as well because so much of it is like a funding question and a funding issue, as well as like a social issue and a like marketing
Yeah,
issue. So
because you might be a holistic organization that's like doing good, but that doesn't mean the people giving you money are. I mean, people question
yeah.
all the time, where is their money from?
No, definitely. And I feel like that's always the one to kind of like fall through the cracks of like you like hold that accountable, but then those even higher up or just different organizations kind of, slips on by. No, that's really awesome to hear. I guess personally, as also being an artist yourself, how has just, I don't know, the past few months like influenced your work and your like creative process as well. It can be either way. You could have worked on nothing or worked on everything. I feel like I've done nothing personally, but
Yeah, I mean, it's a touchy subject for me anyway, because obviously, I graduated college, I got into this job, and I've just put everything into this job and really put my art on the back burner for a long time. And in the last year, pre-COVID, was really trying to push myself to like make work again, build connections again. And I actually, had confirmed, I haven't signed a contract or anything, but like had confirmed a show in December to exhibit my work. And it was super exciting. And then COVID hit, and I was like, oh crap, like, this is kind of crazy. I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that I have a full-time job and that I'm still employed. And so, like, it hasn't impacted me financially, unlike a lot of people. And I'm lucky enough to have a space carved out in my house where I can make work. It's not ideal, but it's enough, and I'm thankful for it. So I have really put a lot of spare time and energy into doing things that hasn't explicitly been like for my art, I would say, but it's been the act of like creating again. Particularly, I've been working on a lot of sewing projects, and I've started making masks. I taught myself how to make some patterns, and I've moved on now to clothing, which, me, I'm like obsessed with fashion too. So it's been a way to like get creative energy out there in my spare time and be kind of like twiddling my thumbs on a Friday night, being like, okay, I don't want to watch, 12 hours of television and go to bed at 4 in the morning. So why don't I just get on the sewing machine and stay up till 4 making masks?
Perfect. No, but that is cool.
So I've been doing that kind of stuff, and then really just thinking a lot too. I think I've always been, this is kind of morbid, but like I've always been afraid of dying and death. And so I've had a lot of anxieties centered around like also being a true believer that like the apocalypse is going to happen someday and like the world is going to fall apart. So like I've been very kind of like, okay, the world literally is falling apart. Like there's natural disasters, like politics is like, I mean, just anyone who watches Back to the Future, that whole like, Trump.
All the warning signs are happening. It is like the red flag of red flags.
So part of me has also just sort of been like, I need to figure out like who I am, what my purpose on this earth is, like what do I need to do before I die?
Yeah, hey, all great quarantine questions.
So I've actually, and just recently, so my art kind of started shifting into this direction of like a little bit of family history and a little bit of like exploration of this relationship between myself and my great grandfather, who in his retirement took pictures of flowers, like just tons of flowers. And so I've been scanning the film and doing digital collages of these flowers and then overlaying it with text that he had written, notes on different like camera settings when he was taking pictures and stuff. So kind of doing some collaging. And then also just through listening to some interesting podcasts about people discovering like thinking one thing about their family history and then doing some research and then discovering like this totally different story that's like not at all what they thought it was. I started to get really interested, and so I've been on ancestry.com and I've been doing some like true like exploration into my family history, and I've been emailing back and forth with my grandpa, who has done a lot of research himself, and I've started building a family tree. And so I'm hoping that research that I'm doing will really influence that show in December, and that there's a way I can kind of weave it in somehow. So I haven't necessarily been like making any art, but I'm in that mindset, and I'm studying and I'm researching and I'm developing things. And I have an idea kind of to, I've been thinking a little bit more, less about like making the work and more about planning the visual sort of presentation or installation of the show in December, and then hopefully in the next couple months I can really crank some stuff out.
Yeah,
For
that's exciting. Oh my gosh, I love
yeah,
that. That could work out kind of well timing wise also because I'm putting this interview into like the our winter issue because our like schedule for printing has gotten kind of thrown off as well. So it'll probably show up around the time when your show opens. So that's just
oh
awesome.
cool,
Goodness.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll send
Where
you more
is it?
develop so
Yeah,
you can.
please do. Please do. Where's the show gonna be? Like what gallery?
It's going to be at White Space Gallery.
Okay,
So it's in the small basement space called White Spec.
yeah. Okay.
Like I said, I've not signed a contract yet, and it's like not on the calendar yet.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like they haven't announced it, so to me, I'm like it's not real until like I've signed a document. And I'm
Yeah.
still like particular, but I think it's still gonna happen.
No, I would hope so. I mean, hopefully, I don't know. I feel like when I was at home at the end of spring, kind of beginning of summer, I still held on to the idea that like fall and next year was gonna be normal or like semi okay. And I think now I've really just kind of I don't want to say given up because I don't feel pessimistic, but I just feel very, very like hardened and realistic of like, oh, things are still gonna be weird for just a while,
Yeah.
and that's the way it is, and it's okay. And anyway, moving on. Um, but no, that's awesome. That's really, really exciting, and I love the family tree aspect of it. I feel like for me personally, I've never really looked that much into like my lineage or my ancestry or stuff because both of my grandparents, like both sets of grandparents, were very, very old, and then passed away when I was like younger. So I never had like a really deep connection to it. But that's cool that you're like intentionally making the effort to like dig into it and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you found anything really interesting or like surprising?
A little bit. So that's the thing too, is like right now I'm just kind of like at names. Like,
Yeah.
but there is in my family lineage, there is a house in rural North Carolina, kind of south of Raleigh, which is where I grew up. Maybe like 40-minute drive, which is it's called like Sampson County, and it's the Thomas Bullard house. So that was like the like sort of like, patriarch, I guess, the guy who like kind of started the family in the
Yeah.
US. And this house is on the historic registry. So I found the historic registry form, which has all of the family history and also like pictures of the house. And my parents have been there with my sister and my grandpa to visit the house because it's still in the Bullard family house. It's a descendant
That's
of Thomas Bullard. So it's kind of cool to have like this old house that's like still
yeah.
in
That's
existence.
you.
I think it's just like I don't know if she lives there or if it's just like a house that's like not like a museum, but just kind of like there. But
Yeah.
but I did discover that, and it was kind of cool. Like just all of the information on it was like the whole. I guess when you do like a historic landmark registration form, like you have to put in all the like details too of like the architecture. So they've like
Yeah.
really, really in detail described the architecture of the house, which if you look at it, it's just like a like rural white
Yeah.
house with like a brick chimney and a porch, and whatever.
Uh-huh.
But like it's like
Very
like
standard.
Greek. It's like something like Euro Greek, like blah blah blah, like foundation. I don't even know. So it's kind of cool to read about that. That's really the only thing interesting I've found so far. My grandpa did send me a treat, I think like 2 days ago, that went all the way back into like 1590.
Oh wow.
Which I'm like, dang, that must have been like pre, like Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Like that's like maybe,
That's like
yeah.
history.
I was like, whoa, which is like really what I'm curious to know because I'm not interested in doing 23andMe yet. I still feel a little bit weird about like giving the government my DNA, but
Yeah.
I do really want to know a little bit more about like my like DNA, um, uh, ancestral history too, because I really want to know like, okay, were they like just run-of-the-mill Europeans, like British, or were they Irish, Scottish? Like, I don't know. I kind of want to know a
Yeah.
little bit about that too, because I've just always felt like I'm just like a grocery store brand like white bread. Like I just have never like really known what kind of white I am, not that it's important, but I feel like, in order for me to like figure out like my place in the world, I feel like I need to figure out what like, am I like a little bit, maybe a little wheat? Is there like a little wheat in there? Like,
Oh my gosh, I love that. No,
um,
100. Yeah, because identity is such like a multifaceted thing, and I feel like people explore it in very different avenues, and like there really is no wrong way to do it because it is simultaneously like yours to shape. But it's so cool. Like I totally get that, but I love that that's like the avenue that you've
yeah.
chosen. But with kind of, I guess, so I know you said earlier, like in March, everything went online and kind of shut down. Do you think that your role as like an arts administrator and an artist like can more peacefully coexist with more like at home time, or like, I don't want to say freedom because you're obviously still very busy with
Yeah.
programming and stuff, but just a completely different schedule than maybe what it was like when you came out of college.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of was like obsessed with working from home when it first started. I was like, party, like I can't wait, like I'm gonna wear PJs all day. I'm gonna like do laundry while I'm working. Like I was so
Yeah.
excited because I previously, pre-COVID, was working Mondays from home, so I
Mhm.
was already kind of used to like getting at least 1 day a week from home.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, I was not very involved in any of the virtual, like honestly, all the work that was being done, like to shift, I was not really part of any of that. Like I just continued writing grants. I mean, the
Yeah.
internship was the biggest shift, I think, for me.
Hmm.
Um, but really, I felt like a lot more productive. I felt like I could get my work done more efficiently. And so I did find, between deadlines and stuff, having a lot more spare time to work on things or just to also spend to like with my partner and like going out into, the lake or whatever,
Yeah.
um, making dinner kind of thing. So I felt like it was really great. But now that we're back on site, I mean, we're working full time again. And so, like, on campus. So I feel like I'm grieving for a second time that, like, working from home for me was, like, really, really healthy for me. And, like, really great for me to, like, finally focus. And because writing grants and, you know, fundraising, like there's so many things about being on campus, not to speak ill of being on campus, because I do, love being around employees again and seeing people that I haven't seen in a while. I think it's so good for the soul. But there are so many distractions and there's so many things that just like get, your attention taken away from really focusing in on like a project. And so I think for me, it's just about shifting, recognizing that love for that time that I had and like really, finding a way to build efficiency at work so that way when I go home, I'm not exhausted, you know,
Yeah.
and finding
Yeah.
boundaries and clear cut space. So I think it's more just kind of like having that and like really recognizing the time and space I had and then finding a way to like balance that and get it back even though I'm back in the office again.
Yeah.
Um, that'll be
Because it's now just like starting again. I think I was saying this at the beginning of like, oh, nothing feels real. I feel like nothing's going on. But now that I am starting to have like deadlines and like, things to show up to again and people are like continuing on, I'm like, oh, okay, I got to get on this bus too. Like,
Yeah, I think it's hard. Yeah. My mom had that a bit of trouble with that too because she, had the summer months off.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And so like she had the summer months off and now it's like getting back and I'm like, okay, like my life never really stopped moving. Like
Yes.
I've always been working and like it's like but I do think for a lot of people like their lives did just kind of stop. And like people who were like laid off or furloughed, I mean like they were getting paid but they weren't doing anything. I have like friends who like have just been like chilling for like a long time and I would go insane. I'm already going insane with my spare time too because like normally if I like got off work at like 6 and went home like I wouldn't even go home. I'd go hang out with friends or I'd go do things but now no hang out and, or people are busy or traveling or doing stuff. And so it's like, there have been moments when I've been bored a little bit, and I just feel like I could imagine never, like, not having a job that keeps you occupied or school that keeps you occupied. So, but
Yeah.
I do think that doing that and building a rhythm again really helps you feel like just like you have a purpose.
Yeah.
There's something you're meant to do. Like, oh, I'm needed at this time. I have a meeting. Like, and I think that's been something people talk a lot about too, even like working from home is like meetings after meetings after meetings. And I think it's because people want to feel like they have a responsibility, because
Mhm.
without that responsibility, a lot of people just don't do well at home by themselves. Like they need accountability of like a boss coming to their office and saying, hey, is this assignment done? Like, whereas they don't get that when they're working from home. So they have
Yeah.
a means to like hold themselves accountable, but then you're exhausted by the end of the day. So
Exactly, yeah. And I feel like you are talking to people for so long, and then there's not as much space to like do action items, because you're just talking about all of the things instead. So it is like, and I feel like that was a problem before COVID or anything, also, of like, at what point is too many meetings, too many meetings. But especially like now that everyone is like available all of the time, that it
yeah.
increases much more because you know what everyone's doing. They're all sitting at their desk on
Yeah,
their
it's like
laptop.
I know you're
Yeah,
not in a
yeah.
meeting.
Suddenly, like all of your accessibility is defined by like a little dot next to your profile or something.
Oh
Like
gosh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
crazy.
But yeah, I think it's you gotta find a rhythm. You gotta find what works. Create boundaries in your space. Like have an office versus like don't eat in the same place that you work. Don't sleep in the same place that you work. Like having like I say, I'm going to the office, like going into my little studio room, and that's like where I work. And then when you're there, it's really easy to be productive because that's where you work. And when you're in the living room, you chill. When you're in the
Yeah.
kitchen, like creating space if you can. I'm sure your apartment's probably small. You can't do that much, but
It's a little small, but we make it work. It's okay. We wipe it down a lot as well because since I have three other roommates, I mean, we're all coming from different points when we do have to go outside, or just go do other things. One of my roommates actually, because she's in a lab class, she has to go to the in-person classes. Um, once a week or so. And so that, is something you just can't really get around. So we're all doing our best with it. But yeah, the space aspect definitely I think makes me feel a little stir crazy. And I'm sure a lot of people, just college students in general, probably have had that, because I know for me, I've been here since summer essentially because my lease started in the summer and goes until next summer. So I was only really at home for like 2-ish months, I guess, 2.5. Um, so I know that's been the case for a lot of other people as well, of like, you already committed to something, so you have to kind of stay there.
yeah.
It's been interesting. I guess, okay, so my last kind of like wrap up question is, so you just opened or had this new exhibition opening, and it's like back to being an in-person venue. I guess, do you see that being rough for a while, of like people still being weird about going to in-person events? Like, will virtual kind of aspects of it still be kept up as well? Will it be kind of like a both thing, or more of a one or the other? Like, because I know I've had conversations with people about this before, of like how the venue of where you're viewing art like changes how you view the art, because a lot of museums and stuff would do virtual events with like showing the artwork or the gallery exhibition on their Instagram story or Instagram TV or a live stream or something like that. And I feel like me seeing that, versus like the rectangle on my phone versus like going into the actual studio or somewhere in person and looking at it and being able to like get up close with it. It's just two very different ways, even though it's the same essential things. Like, what do you see happening with that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's something we're still kind of asking ourselves. The part about people viewing the work, like I think, or like how people will perceive like the opening. I think there's going to be. probably 50% of the audience who doesn't feel comfortable coming in and won't come in, and so will still want virtual. I've
Yeah.
gotten emails from people, even with sending our opening email, saying, "Are you going to offer a virtual tour of the show? Because I don't feel comfortable coming in." And then there's been other people who, like are just so ready to come back. And so I think it'll be 50-50. I think we are projecting and anticipating, at least I'd probably say 20 or 30% decrease in attendance in person over the next year compared to what we were kind of working toward. But we get those audiences back through virtual, and we're going to continue to provide virtual programs probably through the new year. I'm sure, it'll be really difficult for us to host an in-person event
Yeah.
January, even if like it's safe to again. Like that's going to take even longer. I think coming to view an exhibition where you're like one of maybe 20 people in a building is like not nearly as like crazy as like sitting shoulder to shoulder to someone
Yeah.
for an
Listening
hour
to
listening to someone talk, especially too because most of that kind of draw too was from people wanting to meet the person and like have a drink on a Thursday, and like we're not probably going to sell alcohol for a long time, so that
yeah.
we anticipate is not going to kind of shift back into any kind of normal, if at all, probably for over a year or two, even from like today. But I think what we are excited about is like the viewing part. So, we are going to offer virtual tours of the exhibition. We're going to still continue to do that. We are going to have, and leading up to the Studio Artist Program show, we had the curators, when they were doing studio visits to select the artists for this show, they recorded everything. They did everything virtually through Zoom, and they recorded everything. So we have a ton of content to use for virtual programming over the next several months. In terms of like artist talks or curator talks, we are still going to do a live, I think, curator talk with the two curators. And so we anticipate whatever decrease in actual attendance we get, we will see an increase in digital audiences, people connecting with us from outside of Atlanta who maybe wouldn't otherwise, experience the show because they aren't in Atlanta. And so we've been kind of keeping track of that too, and all that data on the back end to kind of like prove and also for grant writing purposes to kind of demonstrate the value in virtual. And we plan to continue virtual even when and if we do go back to like seated in-person lectures, we plan to still live stream so that way those digital audiences don't lose that connection when we be open for in-person events again. So someone from New York can still stream a Discred talk in person on our Facebook or whatever linked up, and they can watch that after the fact too. And I think that's just a great way to like extend the shelf life too of our programming, because I think what's sad is like you work with someone the one time and then it's gone and you never see it again. But if you can record it, then it can live on your site forever, and people can go back to it and they can learn from it. They can use it for a project for school, and they can be able to pause and rewind. And I think that is just going to be such a great learning tool to move forward with. So that's what we kind of anticipate. We've also been a part of a couple different consulting companies, like nationwide audience, like reporting,
cool.
surveys. So we've done one it's called the Audience Outlook Monitor through Wolf Brown Consulting, and they did a they did a local survey to our constituents. They sent us a test, like a template email, and we sent it to our constituents to basically test the like comfort level of our audiences relative to coming back, what they expected of us relative to PPE and certain updates to the campus or transparency of that. Pretty much across the board. Obviously, theater companies suffer because people don't want to watch a theater performance, but also the actors a lot of them are unionized and they won't even let them perform. But like we're kind of in this really niche category where people are more comfortable coming to us, and they're more likely to come if we have certain protocols in place. So we felt like with that data, it made sense for us to open to, because people would come, and people have. We've had pretty, like even on Saturday, by like 3 p.m. we had over 100 people, I think,
Yeah.
already through the building and day with the 25 limit. So I think people are coming in and people are excited that we're open, and we've had pretty unanimous feedback that people are excited to be
Yeah.
there. I've had a
Oh,
few
I know.
people.
I was really excited. Yeah, I know. As soon as my dad actually forwarded me the email he got about like the opening, he was like, "Oh, like I want to go see this with you, so like put some time on your calendar." So
Hey,
I know, and
oh,
he is someone who I would not peg as like being interested in art or is like a huge art connoisseur, but like even he is like, "Oh, like things are opening, like
yeah,
let's go." Yeah, which is so
exactly.
exciting to see. So I'm really happy for you guys. I'm glad that you're able to open and like start having things happen again.
Definitely. So it'll be a minute before before events kind of come back into the fold. But we are doing the Sarah minis. Is something we're doing. Ethan's put together mini wedding ceremonies.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, so we're gonna try and bring those back. And there's a few things we're willing to do in terms of events. And I've heard of a couple other art spaces using their venue as rental for limited capacity, taking everyone's temperature, requiring
Yeah.
that, doing kind of like corporate parties or something where like you can have maybe 20 people in the building. But I think some people are open to that. So we're kind of looking at that and seeing if there's a way to build back some revenue from event rentals through small or like birthday parties with people who've been quarantining together anyway. And so they feel fine coming together. They need a space because they don't want to do it in the backyard or something. I don't know.
No, that makes total sense. I feel like people are just very ready to get back to something. And so if they can make it work even with like a very small crowd, I feel like they'd so much rather do that than have like another Zoom birthday party or Zoom happy hour or,
Yeah.
whatever the current one has been. Awesome. Well, that's really, really exciting.
Yeah.
Makes me happy. Yeah. Cool. Good stuff. All right. Well, that is really all of the questions that I have. So thank you again so much
Yeah.
for being willing to chat with me and everything. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. And if you go to edit it and you like have more questions, shoot me a text. I'm happy to elaborate or send you links or anything like that. And I'll
Yeah,
definitely send you more info about my show in December
yes,
when
me too.
it becomes more
Yeah.
of a reality. They're kind of usually the type to like put it out like at least maybe like a month before it happens, but hopefully it'll
Yeah.
be in time. At least you can share it alongside the
Okay, perfect. No, definitely. That would be very helpful, and I'll once I have it, I can incorporate it like into the little like intro piece, and I'll be sure to send you like the final product and everything as well, and hopefully I can bring over a copy in December when we maybe hopefully print it. I don't really know what's
yeah,
happening with
that'll be so
it,
good.
but if it is, then I will definitely send it your way regardless.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. I know Abby and I talked about coming to see the show as well in the next 2 weeks, and I told you that on Saturday, but just again, you might be seeing us again
I
in
hope
person.
so.
So,
Yes, shoot me a text when you're coming, and I'll be back Tuesday through Friday.
okay,
So
great.
whenever you want to stop by, let me know. Yes.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. Have a great
Yeah,
rest. And tell everyone I say hi. I miss all of you guys.
definitely. It was so good seeing you. Thanks for
Yeah,
coming by. All
of
right. See ya. Bye.